There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded by people who appreciate you, depend on you, even admire you. But still, you feel invisible. You smile. You show up. You play the part you've always played. The calm one, the responsible one, the emotionally stable one, the one who never needs too much. And on the surface, everything looks fine. But underneath, there's a quiet ache. A sense that somewhere along the way, you disappeared. Not in a dramatic or tragic way, just gradually, subtly, intentionally. You didn't vanish. You adjusted. You became the version of yourself that made others feel comfortable. The version that kept things running smoothly. The version that didn't take up too much space. And now, years later, it's hard to tell where the performance ends and the real you begins. This is the hidden cost of being who others need you to be. And most of us don't even realize we've been paying it. If you go far enough back, this pattern usually starts in childhood. Not always in dramatic households. Often in the subtle, quiet ones. Maybe your parents were loving, but distracted. Present, but emotionally unavailable. Maybe they were overwhelmed with their own problems, so you learned not to add to them. Or maybe they were highly reactive, and you learned to anticipate, to soften, to disappear before things escalated. You might not have had words for it back then, but your body learned. It learned fast. It learned that being too loud, too emotional, too needy, or too visible created tension. So you found safety in being easy, in being good, in being low maintenance. You learned that love, or at least peace, came not from being yourself, but from being what others needed you to be. And so you adapted, not just your behavior, but your emotional identity. You shaped yourself around the emotional needs of the people around you. It wasn't conscious. It wasn't manipulative. It was protective. Because when you're young and vulnerable, love isn't just love, it's survival. So you become hyper-attuned, hyper-responsible, hyper-aware. And slowly, the question, who am I, becomes less important than who do I need to be to stay safe, loved, and connected. That question becomes your emotional compass. As you grow older, the pattern matures with you. You become the dependable one, the calm one, the helpful one, the friend who remembers everyone's birthday, the partner who listens more than speaks, the employee who never complains. You make people feel safe. You adapt quickly. You don't rock the boat. And in return, you're liked, trusted, respected. But inside, there's a growing gap between what people see and what you feel, between what you give and what you receive, between the role you play and the person you are. You might have relationships where people feel incredibly close to you, but you don't feel the same in return. Not because you don't care, but because you're not actually there, not fully, not honestly. You're performing connection, not living it. It's not that you're fake. It's that you've become so good at reading the room, so good at managing how others feel, that you've forgotten how to notice how you feel. And so, your life becomes filled with quiet contradictions. You're surrounded by people, but feel alone. You're productive, but feel empty. You're appreciated, but feel unseen. You're loved, but not for the parts of you that remain hidden. You've created a life that works, but it doesn't work for you. One of the hardest things to see about this pattern is that it doesn't look dysfunctional. It looks responsible, mature, emotionally intelligent. You get praised for it, rewarded even, because you're not dramatic. You don't cause problems. You handle things. You keep the peace, but that peace comes at a cost, and you're the one paying it. You don't express your full truth, not because you're incapable, but because you've learned that your truth is often inconvenient. You don't set clear boundaries, not because you don't want to, but because you've been trained to prioritize other people's comfort over your own. You don't even allow yourself to want too much, because desire, for you, feels dangerous. Like the first step toward disappointment, rejection, or conflict. So you stay in this quiet, in-between space, not suffering enough to call it pain, not content enough to call it joy. You tell yourself things like, "It's not that bad. I'm just sensitive. Other people have it worse." And you learn to be grateful for things that don't actually feel good. Because questioning them would mean questioning the whole foundation you've built your emotional life on. The idea that being what others need is the best way to stay safe. But the truth is, safety isn't the same as being whole. At some point, you begin to notice the consequences, not in a dramatic way, not in the form of a breakdown, more like a slow erosion of desire, of clarity, of emotional presence. You begin to lose touch with what you want, not just in big decisions, but in small, everyday moments. You're asked where you want to go, what you want to do, what you feel, and you freeze. Not because you're unsure, but because you've spent years not asking yourself those questions. And when you try, there's silence, or doubt, or the quiet thought, whatever makes things easier for them. This is the essence of self-betrayal. Not doing something obviously harmful, but quietly abandoning your own emotional world over and over again until it barely registers. And what makes this betrayal especially difficult to name is that it doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like kindness, like maturity, like being a good person. You've internalized the belief that the less space you take up, the more you'll be loved. That being emotionally low maintenance makes you valuable. That your ability to adjust is your greatest strength. So when the cost shows up in the form of disconnection, emotional fatigue, or a growing sense of emptiness, you don't question the pattern. You question yourself. Why am I not happier? Why do I feel so alone when I'm never really alone? Why do I feel invisible when people say they love me? These questions aren't signs of brokenness. They're signs of a self that's been waiting patiently, quietly, beneath all the layers of adaptation, asking to be let back in. At some point, a deeper truth begins to emerge. The love you receive, the connection you feel, can only reach as deep as the version of you you're willing to show. If the people in your life only know the version of you that never needs, never disagrees, never disappoints, then the love they offer is landing on a surface you've carefully crafted. They may care deeply, but they're caring for your mask, not your full self. And maybe part of you knows this. Maybe it's what makes the praise feel hollow, what makes the thank you feel distant, what makes the compliments stick to the surface without ever sinking in, because deep down, you know, they don't really know me. They know the version of you that edited out the mess, the contradictions, the sharp edges, the fears, and that version may be functional, admirable even, but it's not whole. Which means the love it receives, the intimacy it attracts, the sense of connection it builds will always be limited. And the longer you live like this, the more it begins to hurt. Not because anyone's done anything wrong, but because you've spent years being loved without ever feeling truly seen. There's no moment of epiphany, no single day when you decide to live differently and everything falls into place. The shift is slower, more emotional than logical. It happens in small moments, when you catch yourself before the autopilot takes over, when you pause before saying yes, when you admit you don't know how you feel, when you let someone see your confusion instead of pretending you're fine. You start to recognize the internal tug, that moment when your instinct is to adapt, to smooth things over, to be what's needed. And in that moment, you try something different. You stay still. You say less. You check in with yourself, not because you have a clear answer, but because you're practicing, slowly, quietly, what it feels like to belong to yourself again. It's uncomfortable at first, sometimes even painful, because the version of you who has always adapted doesn't go quietly. That version feels useful, safe, needed, but safety built on self-erasure isn't really safety, it's silence. And usefulness isn't the same thing as being loved. This isn't a problem you need to solve. It's a pattern you're allowed to grieve. You don't have to burn everything down or confront everyone in your life. You don't have to radically reinvent yourself overnight. You just have to begin telling the truth. Not out loud, not all at once, but internally, quietly, as often as you can. The truth that you've spent a long time surviving by becoming what others needed. The truth that it helped you and that it hurt you. The truth that you want more now. Not more love or validation, more honesty, more presence, more of you in your own life. And that truth doesn't need to be inspiring or elegant or healed. It just needs to be real. The most profound changes often don't look like much from the outside. They look like someone pausing before saying yes, like someone letting themselves be misunderstood instead of over-explaining, like someone grieving the years spent away from their own truth, not with shame, but with compassion. The return to yourself isn't a grand comeback. It's a quiet remembering of what you used to love, of how it feels to speak without editing, of what it means to be loved, not for your adaptability, but for your aliveness. This isn't the end of your performance. It's the beginning of something softer, something truer, a life that doesn't just work for others, a life that finally, gently starts to include you.